Perfect timing. Come on up. Yep. Chairman, members of the council, it's good to see you in person. No masks or nothing, huh? It's like we were real people. I wanted to talk with you real briefly today about the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. We got a planning grant here a couple of years ago to study what would happen if the tribes chose to exercise this jurisdiction. It's a jurisdiction over non-members, criminal jurisdiction. And up until recently, it was limited to just domestic violence cases. So mostly it's women getting beat up by non-member men. So we're in the process of studying that, and we're going to report back to the council on what changes would need to be made, what the cost would be, and then the council can make your own decision about is that something you want to move forward on, or it is. But in the middle of all that process, just 2 weeks ago, there'd been a lobbying effort on behalf of the National Council or National Congress of American Indians for several years to expand this jurisdiction, criminal jurisdiction over non-members. And this is felony jurisdiction up to, you know, it kind of coordinates with the Tribal Law and Order Act, would provide felony jurisdiction for up to 3 years. To expand it so it wasn't just domestic violence, but would allow for related crimes. And then just whoosh, in a period of like 3 days, it happened. Right in the middle of the training we were doing for the Intertribal Working Group. And so before, it was limited to just domestic violence cases. Now it's expanded significantly. It's not just domestic violence cases. It also includes sexual assault. It includes stalking. It includes sex trafficking. It includes child violence. It includes obstruction of justice. It includes assault on tribal law enforcement. So that's significant. Because here on the reservation in the PL 280 state, where we've got a pretty good working relationship with the state agencies, when a 911 call goes, it's whoever's closest. It's not like this is a Lake County call, tribes, you stay away, or tribes or Lake County, this is a tribal call, you stay away. Whoever's closest goes there. So tribal officers might get called into any kind of a call and would respond along with their law enforcement. And if they're assaulted or obstruction of justice happens, the tribes were not able to prosecute those. Those would have to be prosecuted by the state. Now, if the tribes ultimately choose to exercise this jurisdiction, you would have jurisdiction over non-members as well, criminal jurisdiction. There's obviously some downsides that come to that, because if you're incarcerating people in the tribal jail and they're not members, somebody's going to have to pay for medical costs. It seems like whenever anybody goes to the tribal jail, they remember all the medical and dental appointments they haven't made for the last 10 years, and they need them made right away. So that's a significant cost. And I think that there are a couple of things that both tribal governments and the federal government is looking at to try and resolve that. And down the road, this will be in a report, but you know, like group reinsurance funds for tribes banding together, or the tribal or the federal government picking up some of those costs, or the federal government picking up some costs for long-term incarceration. I mean, if you were looking to do that down the road, you'd also need to do some planning on facilities. So that's a whole nother discussion, but the expansion of jurisdiction is significant. It's something the tribes have been fighting for years, since VAWA first came into effect. So it's kind of a big deal going forward. It used to be that it was limited to, you had to prove that the person lived on the reservation or had substantial ties to the reservation. If they were just passing through and beat a woman up, you still wouldn't be able to prosecute them. That's all gone now. So that's going to be a big change, and it's going to change the planning process Our grant goes through the end of September, but we're not going to spend all the money in the grant. We haven't spent hardly any because of COVID. We'll be able to get a no-cost extension beyond that if you want to continue to pursue this. But it is a significant change in terms of jurisdiction. I know the council has been concerned in the past about expanding your exercise of jurisdiction to the maximum allowed by law. And so this is something to just kind of keep in the back of your mind for down the road. That's the big change that happened. The one change that's absent that should have been in there, and I don't know the politics of why it wasn't, but elder abuse should have been in there. There was a lot of effort to get rid, because what happens, as you know, with tribal kids, a lot of times are being raised not by mom or dad, but by grandma or grandpa or aunts or uncles. And there may be instances where those people get abused by non-members. That unfortunately didn't get addressed here, but this is a big step forward. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, any questions for Jim? Jim, what the grant? What is the unexpected or the balance of the grant right now?
Lisa could tell you, but we've got, I'm sure it's over 150,000. We just haven't spent. It was about a $250,000 grant. I don't think we've spent. I'd be surprised if we spent 50,000 to tell you the truth, but Lisa could tell you. She's doing the fiscal management.
Anita.
I just have a quick question, Jim, and thank you. This is great. How many cases do we have a year around here with?
Well, that's going to be hard to say. I mean, we've been working on trying to develop a tracking tool. Initially, we were going to try and track all the state jurisdictions that overlap the reservation, but as we looked at it more than 90% of it would be Lake County. So we really just need to track Lake County to get a good representative sample. You know, there are parts of the reservation in other counties, but if you look at population, it's like 90% of the tribal members live in Lake County. But this changes the equation because we're not just looking at one form of domestic violence. We're looking at sexual assault. We're looking at sex trafficking. We're looking at obstruction of justice. We're looking at assault on peace officers. So we're gonna have to change the metrics of what we're looking at, and we're gonna have to spread a much wider net to try and determine how many cases it would be. It's coextensive jurisdiction. So it's not that the state couldn't prosecute these, but it is that we could as well. Right now, we have a good working relationship with Lake County. Looks like Lopatka is going to be the new county attorney. I communicate with him 2, 3, 4 times a week. Our office does. We're talking about setting up other forms of communication with them. But I just can't give you a number now. We really don't know, especially with the new law, what that would mean. It wouldn't require that you prosecute any of them, but it would allow you to, should you choose to.
So given the added range, that's the thing that you would have to, you'd want to extend the grant to be able to study that,
Yes.
et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And so you're automatically going to do that. File for the
I would
extension.
recommend that. Yeah, I mean, it's council's decision, but I think we should.
Yeah, absolutely. I would concur with that recommendation, Jim, myself.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can pick and choose. So if there's a real aggressive, real horrible, bad optic case, we could grab that one and otherwise the state would continue on doing their normal
and
practice.
this isn't jurisdiction that requires DOJ approval either. There are certain criteria you have to meet. But once you get those criteria met, it's not like Tribal Law and Order Act where they have to approve it and sign off. You just have to do certain things, and if you do, then you can exercise the jurisdiction. And there's a really good intertribal working group meets several times a year. there's a good group of tribal jurisdictions that are implementing this in all different phases. We're part of the sort of the study group, but there's groups that are way far along in implementing this, and there's ones that are just starting. And we've set up a listserv now, so all the prosecutors and all the tribes can talk to each other about these kinds of cases and issues they're having. And there's a pretty strong push nationally to move forward amongst tribal governments on this.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. In your material you sent, it talks about reimbursement. Can you explain that?
Yeah, there's new programming that we don't have the details on. There's a grant. The implementation funds for tribes have been limited to, I think, 5 million per year nationally, and they've quintupled that now. The grant program is up to 25 million. So until the regulations come out, we're not sure exactly what it's going to cover or how you apply for it. But there's going to be funding if the tribes choose to implement the jurisdiction. There's going to be sort of bridge funding for you to cover additional costs. It's not going to last forever, but for a period of time. And of course, it's always dependent on Congress authorizing funds, but there is going to be funding down the road for that transition phase if you choose to exercise that jurisdiction.
Any other questions from council representatives? Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you, Chairman McDonald. How would this change the workload of existing staff? I think this is a great thing, but is this going to dramatically increase
It's going
the
to
workload?
change things some for everybody. You know, it's going to change the workload for the prosecutors. It's going to change the workload for the court. It's going to change the workload for the defenders. My guess is the defenders are not going to want to take on defending non-members as well as members, and you probably would contract that out. There's going to be some changes in terms of you would have to have what's called a law-trained judge to handle the cases, but most of the requirements the tribes already meet. So there would be a few things that might have to change. And again, the cost would depend on how many cases you decide to exercise jurisdiction over. Again, it's discretionary as to, you know, do I want to file against every case that comes along, or do you want to file against, as the chair says, maybe just the most egregious cases? It's going to depend, but that's also part of the study to try and come up with some dollar ranges for the council to look at. If you choose to do this, what's that going to cost you? Because that's an important part of any policy decision.
Has there been any challenges so far?
None that are successful.
With the expansion, is there anticipated challenges that?
You know, I'm sure that somebody will think up some kind of challenge that they'll want to make. It requires that you, before you bring any, like any federal challenges, you have to exhaust all your options through the tribal court system. So any challenges that are brought would have to be brought at the tribal court level. They'd have to go through the appellate court here. And then if there's still something out there, they would have federal habeas relief as a possibility. But so far, there haven't been successful challenges to the expanded jurisdiction. And honestly, I think one of the things that people are finding is that tribal court systems are pretty fair systems. In the first 5 years that this was done, there was only a handful of jury trials, and the majority of those ended up in acquittals. So I think people who don't know the system may be leery of it a little bit, but I think anybody that's practiced in the system is happy to try a case here as opposed to any place else. You get a fair shot.
They would want to exhaust it here. Yes. Any other, oh, Mike, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What happens if a defendant, if the state wants to prosecute and the tribe wants to prosecute in the situation we have here, 280?
it's no different than it is now. We have concurrent felony jurisdiction over tribal members. And I think the most important thing is to keep the lines of communications open. You know, if you don't have a good working relationship with the state, there's going to be trouble. I mean, as it is now, if I chose to prosecute a homicide, there's nothing the state could do about it, nor could they prosecute the case if I filed it first. So there are a lot of pitfalls out there, but I think they're all solvable if people work together in good faith. So it doesn't change the equation, it just expands it a little bit. And it may expand it in a way where there's going to be more political pressure for there to be conflict. Because if you start prosecuting non-members, then, you know, all the haters will come out of the woodwork. But there usually are anyway, so won't change things all that much.
Thank you, Jim, for the update.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
One other thing, though, I do want to tell you, and this is not on the agenda, but my contract's up the end of September, and it's not my intention to renew it. I'm going to be turning 67. I think the department's in a lot better shape than it was when I came here 3 years ago. If you want my 2 bits worth, it would be to offer the position to Maylin Smith. She's in the office. She knows everybody. I'd have 6 months to work with her to make sure she understands the budgeting process and some of the management aspects of it. I think she would be a great choice. It would provide continuity to the office. It's a lot easier to replace a line prosecutor than it is a managing attorney. It's a different skill set. So that would be my thought, but it's absolutely your call. If there's projects that come up in the future you think I'd be good at, I would be more than happy to continue to work on projects for the tribe, but I just, this is a young person's game. You know, the prosecution, it's like drinking from a fire hose. You know, every day there's just a set of emergencies lined up that you've got to deal with. And there are deadlines on everything, and it's a younger person's game. I'm able to keep up, but just kind of by the skin of my teeth, and it's not going to work for me long term.
Well, obviously, Jim, you haven't heard that the 60s are the new 40s. So people have
Neither
told
is
me
it.
that many times. But I can relate to what you're saying.
Yeah.
You know.
Anyway, I just want to give you a heads up. That's 6 months from now. There's plenty of time for you guys to figure out what you want to do. But that I think Maylin would make a great replacement. It would provide continuity for the office. It would allow you to just hire a line prosecutor to replace that position. I don't think she wants to switch to start doing criminal. She likes doing the civil stuff and the CPS and the mental health commitments and those things. But she definitely has the skills to do the management. And I think she'd accept the position. I let Decker know, Dan, this morning that that'd be my recommendation. I think he thinks it's a good idea too, but you folks do what you need to do.
Thank you, Jim, for
Okay,
that
thanks.
heads up. And thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Okay, next we have Billy Lee. Billy Lee, good morning. Welcome. Good to see you. You'll. Choose from any chair. There you go. And please use the mic, push the button, Billy.